was surprised to see some Orlando -5 in the accounts. Usually they're not betting sides in NBA playoffs. Even in NHL, it's not really a lot of sides. It's mostly totals. We talked about those yesterday, how they got out and bet the unders in a handful of totals. They're usually betting the totals, and they're betting the player props because the limits are a little higher during the playoffs, and there's a lot more recreational money betting the props every night because they're so important. They're so popular, and a lot of these lines are going to be shaded towards those biases. We know that recreational players, they want overs. They want to see points. They're rarely going in there and betting player props under. So I see during this time during the playoffs, they'll isolate a player or two where they think this line's a little bit too high. There's some recency bias around it where maybe they had 2-3 of the last games where they put up a lot of points, but it's not, where their season average even is. And those are the kind of props that I see they take advantage of the most during the NBA playoffs. But like I said, I was a little bit surprised to see the Orlando -5 in multiple accounts. And then in baseball, 952 over 8.5 last night at -110 Arizona, Miami, and then followed through this morning, laying -15, laying -120 to go over 1.5. Also Washington, Pittsburgh. That was only bet last night. They bet the over 8.5 all the way up to -120. Then they backed off. Nothing today. And the last side, Atlanta, Toronto, where there was follow through again, they went under the 8 up to -105 last night, laid it up to -125 today, which is why you're looking at a lot of 7.5s there. A few of the sides that jumped out was Philly because they got follow through -140 and 45 last night, then laid the -150 this morning. And the same thing with Baltimore, -130, 135 last night, came through and laid the -140 this morning. That's what sticks out the most. Not a lot of volume so far. I've been seeing a lot more late stuff than in the past, whether that's just waiting for confirmation of lineups or maybe more books to offer numbers. Because, again, like I keep getting accounts, and perfect example this morning, a friend of mine sent me over 2 accounts that we take a percentage of. I sent them in, and I just had to let them know, these guys don't take overnights. Like, you can't put a bot on it. But more importantly, they don't give overnights. So they're only giving out day of the game. And more books are doing that. The ones that cater to sharp action, I see it all the time where they're not putting lines up till later, as late as possible, even sometimes like later in the afternoon. But they're willing to take big bets and bigger limits because they feel by that time the line's stabilized. Like that, it's probably at where it should be, where at least they believe there's not too much value, as opposed to being able to bet it earlier in the morning or the night before, where we see these lines move significantly when compared to how they move, 3 hours before the game up until game time. They don't move as significantly except for the very, very late stuff that usually happens a lot earlier, the bigger moves at least. If not injury related, something like that.
Yeah. If you're a parlay bettor, such as myself, Formula One race, take a look at Ferrari double top 10 and Mercedes double top 10. Both of those can go in your parlays. If you're looking at golf this week, it's a really bettable golf tournament. I see on the off screens Tom Hoge over Taylor Pendrith. Hoge is way better. His last 3 finishes are 14th, 5th, and 3rd. Pendrith has missed the cut in 3 out of 5 tournaments. Hoge is 4-0 head-to-head against Taylor Pendrith the last 4 that they've played in together. There's a golf bet for everybody. And then going to NBA, Nuggets versus Clippers. DraftKings has over 5.5 games at -190. I feel like as long as Kawhi stays healthy, that is a really close series. I would struggle to see how like a 4-1 happens. As long as each team wins 2 games, you're good to go there. Lakers and Timberwolves over 5.5 games, same thing. As long as everyone stays healthy, I think this is a close series. I don't see anybody getting blown out. That's -175. If you're a parlay bettor, you can parlay both those together for +140. So those are some plays that I'm looking at in the NBA. So take a look at those Formula One parlay pieces, NBA, and then golf as well.
The guy's been on 9 teams. He's worn 50 on 6 of them. He wore 37, 63, and 47. My youth football number was 47, and my son wears 50 for baseball. So I like Charlie Morton. Let's root for him tonight. But all things seriously, probably not a good spot in it. It's interesting, though, you bring up a good point about how he's not having a good season, and he's been pitching for a while. This is something we find a handful of guys every year like this. And you're like, well, there's two ways to look at this. When a guy's got a 8.78 ERA after 3 starts, you're like, well, he's still in the lineup because the managers obviously think he has something, right? Otherwise, he'd be thrown down to the minors. That's not always the case, especially when a guy is almost as old as his jersey number, which is 50 in this case. And I think he's hanging around, and we might get some value fading him for a couple more starts. 4.2 ERA last year in 30 starts, 3.6 the year before that. So he's been very serviceable. And this is the type of guy that they might leave in the lineup a little longer than they should. He's tied for the league lead in losses, 0-3. That ties the league lead in losses. So he's got that going for him, a league leader right here. Until we see otherwise, I'd be very careful with Morton. And the Orioles are a kind of team I've had on my list to maybe fade this season anyway. I'm very local here to their AAA team, the Norfolk Tides. They've had a ton of talent coming up the last several seasons. So they went from literally the worst team in the league 3-4 years ago to the best moneymaker in sports the last 2.5 years. You got to figure at some point that's going to start to plateau off. And I still think they're very short on starting pitching. And coming into this season, I'm thinking, maybe the regular season they can get by with all this offense like they've been doing, but their pitching is thin. And that's another reason why a guy like Charlie Morton might stay in the lineup, the pitching rotation, rather longer than he should. So I do think he's over the hill. I think this 8.8 ERA is not a fluke. And I'd be very careful with the Orioles going forward for that reason. And then on top of that, you look at this number here. You're laying $1.45. You're getting the Guardians at plus 130. So it's not like it's priced into the line yet. I would not be laying $1.45 with Morton anytime soon. And you probably won't have many opportunities to fade him anytime soon either if he continues like this. This is a rematch from the finals season finale on Sunday, in which Atlanta won as a 3-point dog, and they weren't playing anybody. They went from a 2-point favorite to like a 3-point dog, won the game outright still. And Orlando, meanwhile, does have Banchero and Wagner on the injury report, but they're listed as probable. I expect them 100% to go. Suggs has been out for half the season. He is their best defender. And I do think they're a weaker defensive team without Suggs. And both of these Atlanta games the last week, they played last Tuesday, by the way, also. They both went over the total. With that said, though, Orlando's still the best defensive team the last 15 on efficiency, the second best in the season overall, whereas Atlanta's the third best offensive efficiency team. So it's offense versus defense here. It's pace versus pace. Atlanta's one of the fastest teams in the league. Orlando is the slowest squad. But as I mentioned, the two meetings over the past week both got up and over. So I do think Orlando's had trouble slowing them down. And I also think the Magic can score in this game more than average because Atlanta doesn't guard the big wings well. So I'll look for Wagner and Banchero to both have nice games here. I think their player props over. At worst, you probably split out. I would play them both over their point prop. Their point props are higher than their season averages, but keep in mind that's because this game will have a faster pace and more points. So don't let that scare you off. We never look to fade superstars in playoff games or postseason games in this situation. So I'd like those two guys over the total. And I think the game itself could go over for that reason. And Andy, talk about trends here for the play-in games. We don't have a lot of data, but one thing that jumped out to me, of course, last year was on this Thursday, how the games soared under. In fact, they both moved about 5 to 6 points to the under last year, and they both stayed under still. We've seen both of these games move several points to the under. Actually, the late game Memphis games moved about 5 points to the under. This one had moved a point down when I did my video last night, but now it's a point back up. So I think this one has over potential, and I think all this low-scoring postseason play-in games has been factored in already, and this line is too low. I'd look at Atlanta, Orlando over, and also look at Banchero and Wagner over their point totals as well at 7:30 Eastern.
I know there's a lot of things behind the Grizzlies. Obviously, they fired their head coach, Coach Jenkins. They got their new coach, and one of the biggest things for me, obviously I look at post All-Star numbers. The Grizzlies not that great after the All-Star break that led to the firing. They were only 6-21 ATS. They did close out winning 4 of their last 6 games. On the Warriors side, they were dominant post All-Star break, 20-7 straight up. But then they went 3-3 to close out the season. And then, obviously Kerr had that post game interview saying that he's still trying to figure out the rotation and all those things. It seems like momentum. It seems like they're kind of going in opposite directions to close out the season. One of the things that I did notice with the play-in specifically, the Warriors have not done well in the play-ins. They're 0-3 straight up in the play-ins. The Grizzlies are actually 2-0. Obviously, without Jenkins, it's a little bit different. But one thing that I did see that the Grizzlies struggled with was defending the 3-ball post All-Star break. They were one of the worst at defending the 3. But since their new head coach came in, they've dramatically improved. I think it's like 10th in defensive 3-point rating since he came in. I think that's about 7 or 8 game sample size. Prior to that, they were like bottom 5 in the league in defending the three. And obviously the Grizzlies are one of the top teams as far as 3-point frequency. So that's going to be one big thing that I think the Grizzlies might have, sort of like a little edge that maybe the books haven't really accounted for yet. And then the Warriors at home, they struggle to cover at home when they're heavily favored. I looked at this season when they're favored by 5 or more at home. They're only 4-13-2 ATS, 12-7 to the under. I know Steve mentioned, sort of like the under trend for the play-ins throughout the last 4 years or whatever. It's actually 70% to the under for all play-in games since the beginning of adding it to the season. I think this one also goes under too. I'm kind of looking towards the Grizzlies to cover the 7 and to the under. I think it moved down like 3 points from the open, but still look towards that under spot.
This is one of those games where both teams, it's already decided, just mathematically, the way things are going to work out. These teams are going to play each other in the first round. So congratulations to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who I have all kinds of fun poking fun at. They have won the division. So it's huge for them, but it's great for TV ratings. You're going to get the Battle of Canada there with Ottawa and Toronto. In the first round, you're going to get the Battle of the Sunshine State with Florida and Tampa. This will mark the last game of the season for the Florida Panthers, and I think they actually go out swinging. I think they come out and perform very well, and the overnight money actually went towards the home team with Tampa Bay. And I'm sure a lot of that, Andy, has to do with the fact that it's second half of back-to-back, and people just love fading teams on second half of back-to-back. But I think they go out with some pride here. Because my numbers, as far as the score says, that the Rangers beat the Panthers 5-3. The expected goal numbers were closer to a victory for the Panthers, somewhere along the lines of 2.8 to 1.3. So it sounds like Florida actually had a better game, created more chances in their game against New York than maybe the final score indicated. And I feel like sometimes with good teams, second half of back-to-back can be a bet on opportunity. With bad teams, you fade it. But with good teams, past few months, I've loved betting on them, especially off the loss. They feel that extra edge, that motivation, and especially with this being the last game of the season, they're going to want to win. Last year, en route to winning the Stanley Cup, the Florida Panthers went 7-3-1 on the road in the playoffs. I am not worried about them being on the road in this one. Of course, not much travel against the Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm going to take them to win here. Andy, I love this price. We're getting a nice plus price on it with plus 154. And if you want to play it safer, you can take that team total over 2.5 at minus 120. Maybe do a half bet on each. I think Florida shows up today in this one. I'll keep the next one short and simple with Calgary and Vegas. This is one of those ones where I always tell people, must win does not mean will win. But I certainly like how Calgary's playing right now. And this is one of those spots where Vegas could care less. They've had a fantastic season. They're getting ready for the playoffs. They have a rather veteran-built team. They're going to rest a few guys tonight. They're going to go mid-season NBA form and probably pull some load management actually late in the season here in the NHL. Calgary's been playing well. They're hungry right now. They've got great goaltending. I'll look for a low-scoring victory for the Calgary Flames. Vegas opened up minus 135 overnight. That number turned into a pick, and then now it's some shops favored for the Calgary Flames. I'm buying into that. I think that's accurate, and that's the way we should go here. Follow the money with the Calgary Flames on the money line against the Vegas Golden Knights.